It is so good to be here together on this day of all days. Eugene Peterson, the author of that wildly popular biblical translation, The Message, says that he remembers one Easter sermon from his childhood. He said the pastor of his home congregation got up and launched into a sermon outlining 13 incontrovertible proofs that Jesus was really raised from the dead. Proofs that the pastor said his congregants could take and wrestle into submission all of their unbelieving friends. And Peterson says what he really remembers about the sermon is it took about an hour and a half to get through, and that by the time he was finished, nobody in the congregation really cared if Jesus was raised from the dead or not. Now, don't get me wrong. I believe that the historicity of the resurrection is central to our Christian faith, and I believe in it with my whole heart. But I think on a morning like this morning, maybe even more important than did it happen is, what difference does it make? Can it really do something in my life? Can it really bring back the dead parts inside of me? Because I believe that on a morning like this morning, we are much more interested than in proving the resurrection. We're more interested in participating in it. Isn't that right? Throughout this Lenten season, we have been going through a sermon series that we've called Transformed, as we explore the ways that God's love, when it really gets down inside of us, changes the practical, nitty-gritty parts of our lives. The way that this unfathomable, unconditional love and forgiveness, this acceptance that meets us exactly where we are, just the way we are, when we allow it to seep down into the center of our lives and the core of our being, the way that it changes us from the inside out. And one of the things that has been clear throughout the centuries, from year to year and culture to culture and place to place, is that there is something about this love. There's something about this love that God has poured out into our lives that has a way of bringing back to life the dead things inside of us. You know, as skeptical as some people are about what happened on that first Easter morning, there is no denying, nobody even tries to refute that something was released into this world on that morning. Something real and inexplicable, a power that has the ability to change lives, to wake people up from the deepest slumber, to bring new life back into the deadest of lives, to bring a new kind of joy and peace and sweetness of spirit that has caused people to take complete radical turns and do things with their lives that nobody would have ever expected. All of the first hospitals were started by people who had found this love through Jesus Christ. All of the first universities and aid organizations and orphanages all started from this same love. The slave trade taken on and defeated by this same love. All of the child labor laws, so many things that people have done through the years. There is something about this love that has the power to bring dead things to life. And I don't know if there's ever been a time in our world that we've needed it more, right? On the week that we've just dropped the largest non-nuclear bomb that mankind has ever dropped on one another. This week, when just after we sent 59 cruise missiles into Syria because Assad was gassing his own people again. This week, when we send our aircraft carriers to park menacingly off of the North Korean peninsula as Kim Jong-un parades out his interballistic missiles in a parade and threatens all-out nuclear war. This week, after Coptic churches in Egypt have been bombed and terrorism is alive and well all over the globe, and relationships with Russia are tenser than they've ever been before. We are in a time that could use some rebirth and new starts, aren't we? Well, it's interesting. This drama that was so beautifully done comes from John's version of that first Easter story. And when John in his gospel writes this story, he starts by saying, early in the morning on the first day of the week, while it was still dark. Other translations say while it was still pre-dawn. Others still say while it was deep dawn. And we need to understand that John is the most metaphorical, the most symbolic of all of the gospel writers. And so when he talks about the deep dark of dawn, he is not just talking about a physical darkness. We need to be clear about that. He's talking about a deep dark of night of the soul kind of darkness, a Moab detonating kind of darkness, aircraft carriers off Pyongyang kind of darkness. The Gospel of Luke was the one that said that Mary had come with spices and oils to anoint Jesus' body, to get some things done. But John leaves us with the clear impression that she had come to mourn and to grieve, to be with his body one more time, to say goodbye, to maybe try to find some closure. Because what we need to understand is on that day that Jesus died, there was a part of her that had died as well. Because we all believe in death, don't we? I mean, even here on the west side of Los Angeles, it's almost a miracle, but I haven't met one person who's an agnostic when it comes to the subject of death. There was a woman one time, she was interviewed on her 103rd birthday, and she was asked, do you do anything different because of your advanced age? And she said, well, some things. I don't buy green bananas anymore. We all believe in death, don't we? And not just our physical death, but the death of everything that we hold dear over time, the death of all of our relationships, the death of our career, the death of our hopes and dreams, the death of all of the gifts, the great gifts that God gives to us, because it's just reality, isn't it? At the end of every great story comes a death. And it's not always at the end either. Maybe one of the worst possible kinds of death that we have to face is that some people sleep into a sort of walking death while they're still alive. Our hearts become hardened and the walls go up and we just plod from day to day and we just try to get through the next thing and keep our head above water. A little boy was walking with his grandmom through a graveyard one time, and they were having a ball. The grandmom was showing him all of the tombstones and what the different symbols mean and telling him what the abbreviations are, told him what RIP means, and was showing him how the dates, that the first date is the date that the person was born and the second is the date that they died. And the little boy turned to his grandmom and said, Grandmom, why is it on some of these graves there's a date of birth with a dash, but there is no date of death? And the grandmom explained to him that those were people who hadn't yet died. And so they were home that night, and the little boy was so excited telling his mom all about their trip to the cemetery and explaining everything to him. But then at one point his eyes got as big as saucers and his voice got really, really low, and he said, and guess what, Mom? Some of the people who are buried in that graveyard, they're not even dead yet. But isn't it true? The very worst kind of death is when we are dead while we're still alive and we might not even know it. The kind of death that allows us to just go from day to day and month to month, even year to year, without changing or growing or becoming anything new. No hopes or dreams that we're the exact same person today that we were last year this day. If you notice, when Mary arrives at the tomb and she sees that the stone is rolled to the side and the tomb is empty, the first thing she does is she panics and she runs back and says, "Someone has stolen the body." Now, I think this is very telling. It's very interesting to me because Jesus had been extremely clear with all of them over and over again. He said, "I am going to need to go into Jerusalem. I am going to be arrested, tried, convicted, killed, and on the third day, I am going to rise again from the dead." And so wouldn't you think when Mary is there 3 days later, when she sees an empty tomb and the burial cloth folded up neatly in the tomb there, when she sees the angel in the tomb, that it might have just crossed her mind, even for a moment, that perhaps Jesus had gone and done the very thing that he said he was going to do. But the truth is that she was too blinded by her grief. She was so blinded by her grief that even when Jesus stands next to her and starts talking to her, she doesn't realize that it's him. Right? She thinks he's the gardener. She says, "Where have they taken him? Please just tell me so I can go and get his body." Because what we may not understand is on that day that Jesus died, there was a part of her that died as well. And it made it almost impossible for him to see her, to see Jesus standing next to her, right there with her the whole time. Do you mind if I ask you a really personal question this morning? If I go from preaching to meddling in your life a little bit? Is there something inside of you that has died that needs to come back to life? Is there something inside of you that needs a redo, a fresh start, a resurrection? Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's a spouse or a child or a parent or a friend. Maybe there's someone that you've been wanting to help, but you're just at a loss at what you can do. Maybe a parent is showing signs of Alzheimer's or needs to go into a facility, and you don't even know how to begin to broach that subject. Maybe there's somebody who's hurt you, and you're not sure where to go from there. Or you're pretty sure that you've hurt somebody else, and you don't know how to even begin to ask for forgiveness. Maybe you've lost somebody through divorce or through a fight or because they've moved away or maybe from death itself. And you don't know how to regroup or move on or go from here. Maybe it's a job. Maybe you lost your job and it's been weeks or months and you're not sure what to do about it and how to move forward and how to go on. Or maybe it's just the opposite. Maybe you have a job, but it is sucking all of the life out of you. You're working at it so hard that the things that are actually important in your life, like your family and the things that you really care about, are getting your chump change. Maybe it's your health or your finances. Maybe it's your relationship with God, God's self. That you feel far away from God and your spiritual life is struggling and you don't know what to do to bring that back to life. Or maybe it's contentment itself, which has been eluding you and you're not sure where to go. Do you believe that because of this morning, because Jesus Christ was resurrected from the dead, that the dead things inside of you can be resurrected as well? And not only that, do you believe that God can take those broken things in your lives, those dead things, those failures and those struggles, the very things that are hurting you, that God can take those and do something beautiful with them? There's an amazing true story about the violinist Itzhak Perlman. You all know who he is. He was doing a concert one time, and right in the middle of the concert, suddenly one of his violin strings broke. It was such a loud crack that it echoed throughout the entire theater. It sent a jolt up everyone's spine, and the conductor stopped the whole orchestra and waited for him to change the string. But the moment he stopped the orchestra, Itzhak just signaled him to keep going. And so the conductor kept the music going. And the most unbelievable thing happened. Itzhak Perlman began improvising and modulating. You could see his mind going a million miles an hour as he started to recompose the entire score in his mind as he started to find other ways to play the same notes. He began tuning and retuning the strings as he went along. And the most amazing thing happened. The music did not lose one beat. It did not lose 1 ounce of the quality. In fact, it was probably even more beautiful than it would have been otherwise, because seeing him play on these 3 strings just showed the genius, the master that he was on this violin. When the concert finally ended, the place went berserk. Everyone jumped to their feet and started screaming and shouting and cheering, a standing ovation that they couldn't get to die down for the longest time. They finally got people to their seats. And Perlman walked up to the microphone and very humbly said, "It is my heart. It is my passion to make music with what is left over." Do you believe that God can take the broken, the hurting, the dead things in your life and not just bring them back to life, but actually use them to make beautiful music, to do something more than you had ever imagined in your life? And what is it going to take to allow that to happen? What is it going to take for you to understand that Jesus Christ is here in this room today, that Jesus Christ is standing next to you and whispering your name into your ear? If you noticed, for Mary, it wasn't having Jesus standing next to her. It wasn't even the first time that Jesus spoke to her. It was when she heard him say her name, Mary. And Jesus said, Rabboni, or Mary said Rabboni, which means teacher. Wouldn't it be the ultimate irony if you went out and bought some beautiful Easter outfit? Don't see a lot of bonnets here today, but maybe even a bonnet. Went out and got a basket and the candies and made brunch reservations and came here and battled for parking and made it into this seat early and listened to these beautiful music and sang these amazing hymns and listened to this story. And still you were so busy thinking about your brunch reservation. Or you were so caught up in believing that nothing could ever change that you missed the risen Christ standing right beside you, whispering your name into your ear. Because the amazing thing about Easter morning is that when Jesus says, "Behold, I make all things new," that means you and me right here and now, that we can have our own resurrection and we don't have to wait until we die to receive it. That because of this morning, not only is Jesus resurrected, but we can be as well. That not only can we celebrate this resurrection, but we can become a part of it. Because Jesus stands next to you right now and calls your name. What's it going to take for you to be a part of this? Amen.